In the vastness of space, where stars shimmer like diamonds and planets float in the silence of the universe, a young explorer named Ethan had always felt the call of adventure. He wasn't a typical crew member of a large space station or a trained officer. No, Ethan was a dreamer. He spent most of his time exploring the forgotten corners of space history, digging through old archives and ancient data logs. And it was during one of these quiet nights, when the station was almost deserted, that he stumbled upon something that would change everything. There it was, hidden deep in an archive older than most space stations. A tattered map, unlike any he had ever seen before. It was marked with strange symbols and lines that didn't make sense at first. But there was one thing that was clear: it led to a place no one dared to go. The forbidden Terran space. The very name sent a chill down Ethan's spine. This region of space was spoken of only in whispers, a part of the galaxy that no one had entered in centuries. His hands trembled as he carefully studied the map. The forbidden Terran space. What could be there? What secrets did it hide? Ethan's mind raced with thoughts of untold treasures, ancient civilizations, and mysterious technology that could change the course of human history. But alongside the excitement, there was a creeping fear. This was a place avoided by even the most seasoned explorers. No one returned from there. Despite the warning signs, Ethan couldn't ignore the pull. He had always wanted to push the boundaries of human exploration, to be the one to find what others feared. So, he made a decision that would lead him to a path few had dared to take. He would go to the forbidden Terran space. With a sense of determination, he contacted his closest friends, a small crew he trusted with his life. They were a mix of seasoned veterans and rookies, but all of them shared Ethan's thirst for discovery. At first, they were skeptical. The forbidden Terran space was off-limits for a reason. But Ethan's passion and the thought of uncovering something no one had ever seen before won them over. The crew gathered in the control room of their ship, the Endeavour. Ethan stood before them, holding the ancient map, his eyes shining with excitement. He spoke with confidence, almost as if trying to convince himself as much as his crew. "This could be the discovery of a lifetime," he said. "We have the chance to explore a place no one has dared to enter for centuries. Think about what we could find. What we could learn." The captain of the crew, a seasoned space traveler named Captain Lyra, stood quietly, listening to Ethan's words. She had seen countless star systems, explored dangerous anomalies, and faced more than her fair share of challenges. But this was different. She had heard the stories, the rumors about the forbidden Terran space. Some said it was cursed, others said it was a graveyard for lost ships. "We need to be careful," Captain Lyra said, her voice firm. "This isn't just another uncharted system. There's a reason no one goes there." But Ethan's enthusiasm was contagious. Slowly, one by one, the crew began to agree. The temptation to explore the unknown was too great. They knew the risks, but the possibility of discovering something groundbreaking was too alluring to resist. As the Endeavour set course for the forbidden Terran space, the atmosphere on board was tense. The crew couldn't ignore the sense of unease that hung in the air. They were heading into a part of space where the rules of the universe seemed to bend and twist. It was a place that didn't belong on any star map, and yet it was marked with an ominous symbol on the ancient map Ethan had found. As they journeyed deeper into uncharted space, the stars seemed to grow dimmer, and the silence of the cosmos grew heavier. It was as though the universe itself was holding its breath. Every crew member felt it. This was no ordinary mission. They were about to enter a forbidden domain, a place where few had ventured and even fewer had survived to tell the tale. Ethan looked out at the vastness of space, his heart racing with anticipation. He didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was certain: he was on the brink of something extraordinary. The forbidden Terran space was waiting, and they were about to step into the unknown. But as they approached their destination, a growing sense of dread began to creep into Ethan's mind. What if they weren't ready? What if the stories were true? The journey had begun, and there was no turning back now. As the Endeavour sailed deeper into the heart of the forbidden Terran space, the ship's systems hummed with an unsettling quiet. The stars around them, once bright and familiar, now seemed distant, as though they were being swallowed by a vast, uncharted darkness. It wasn't just the vast emptiness that unnerved the crew, it was the overwhelming sense that they were no longer in control of their surroundings. The deeper they ventured, the more alien and oppressive the space felt. Ethan stood by the observation window, staring out at the void. It was as if the very fabric of space itself had changed. The map he had discovered in the ancient archive had led them this far, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. This place didn't feel like any uncharted region he'd explored before. The silence was too deep, too suffocating. Even the ship's engines seemed quieter than usual, their sounds swallowed by the unnatural stillness. "Captain," Ethan said, his voice carrying a note of uncertainty, "have you noticed it? The way everything feels, off." Captain Lyra, always composed, turned from her post at the control panel. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned the readings. The usual hum of the ship's machinery seemed muted, and the instruments were reading strange fluctuations. "I've been noticing it," she replied slowly. "Something's not right. But we're too far in to turn back now. We push forward, no matter what." The crew was on edge. Some of them had been trained for combat, others for exploration, but none had faced anything like this. Even the bravest among them couldn't shake the gnawing fear in the pit of their stomachs. They were crossing a line, entering a place where no one had ever dared to tread. The forbidden Terran space wasn't just another stretch of unexplored space, it was a region shrouded in mystery and dread. As the Endeavour moved deeper into the blackness, the crew began to notice subtle oddities. The star charts, which had been programmed to guide them, started to glitch. Coordinates would shift without warning, and the display screens flickered, showing strange, unreadable symbols. This wasn't just technical failure, it was as if the very space around them was playing tricks on them. The crew members exchanged uneasy glances. Had they entered a place where the laws of physics themselves were warped? "Keep your eyes on your stations," Captain Lyra ordered, her voice steady but with an underlying edge. "No one gets distracted. We're in this together." Ethan couldn't help but feel the weight of their situation. He had dreamed of exploring the unknown, of discovering hidden corners of the universe, but he had never imagined something like this. The map had led them here, but now that they were so far into the forbidden space, he wondered if it had been a mistake. Was the knowledge they sought worth the risk? Was it worth the fear slowly creeping up on them? The crew remained silent as they followed the path laid out by the map. They passed through a region of space where the stars seemed to bend and stretch. A deep purple mist surrounded them, swirling like a fog, and the ship's lights flickered sporadically. The instruments on board registered strange cosmic anomalies, and for the first time, the crew couldn't find an explanation for what was happening. "All systems are operating at 50% capacity," reported Jax, the ship's chief engineer, his voice laced with anxiety. "There's interference in the power grid. I can't stabilize the systems much longer." Captain Lyra turned sharply. "What do you mean, interference?" "I mean," Jack said, glancing at his console in frustration, "I'm seeing anomalies in the power flow. It's like something is pulling the energy from the ship, draining it. We're going to have to make a decision, either turn back or risk losing everything." Ethan felt a cold sweat forming on his brow. It wasn't just the ship's systems that were failing, it was the entire region of space they were in. Nothing made sense. The stars, the power, the ship, it was as though they were trapped in an endless loop, and the universe itself was bending around them. Despite the engineer's warning, Captain Lyra made the call to continue onward. "We don't turn back. We can't. We have to know what's out here. We're explorers, and we're not about to let some glitch in the system stop us." There was no going back now. The crew continued their journey, even as doubt began to settle in their minds. With each passing hour, the eerie stillness around them grew more suffocating. The tension on board the Endeavour was palpable. Everyone was thinking the same thing: what were they walking into? And more importantly, was it already too late to leave? Suddenly, a shrill alarm echoed through the ship, cutting through the heavy silence like a blade. The crew scrambled to their stations, panic rising in their chests. The navigation systems blinked wildly, unable to process the coordinates. "Ethan, what's happening?" Captain Lyra shouted, her voice edged with urgency. "I don't know." Ethan replied, his heart pounding. "It's like the space itself is shifting." Before anyone could react, a low, rumbling sound vibrated through the hull of the ship. The walls seemed to groan, as if the very ship was being compressed under some invisible force. The Endeavour lurched violently, and for a split second, the crew feared they might lose control. The lights flickered, casting long, twisted shadows down the hallways. And then, everything went silent again. The crew stood frozen, holding their breath. What had just happened? Where were they now? They had crossed a threshold. They had entered a domain of space where no human had ever been, and whatever forces were at play, they were now in full effect. The journey into the forbidden Terran space had only just begun, and already, it felt like a mistake. But there was no turning back now. The silence that followed the violent jolt of the Endeavour felt suffocating, as though the air itself had thickened. The crew stood frozen, their eyes wide with shock, as they tried to make sense of the chaotic signals blinking across their screens. The rumbling beneath them had stopped, but the damage had already been done. The ship, once steady and in control, now felt like a fragile object drifting in an ocean of uncertainty. Ethan was the first to break the silence. His voice trembled as he spoke, trying to regain some semblance of authority. "What was that? What just happened?" Captain Lyra, equally shaken but maintaining her composure, began issuing commands. "Check the hull. I want a full report on the ship's status. Is there any external damage?" The crew moved quickly, assessing the situation with nervous energy. Jax, the engineer, checked his console, his fingers flying over the screen, but his expression only grew darker. "No external damage, but there's something strange happening with the gravitational fields around us. It's like the space itself is shifting, warping." "What do you mean, warping?" Lyra asked, her voice low with concern. She knew that their journey was already beyond the limits of what they had prepared for. "I mean that it's not just space bending," Jack said slowly, looking up from his console, his eyes wide. "It's the fabric of reality itself. The ship's systems are struggling to adjust. It's like we're in a pocket dimension, or something else entirely." Ethan's stomach dropped. This wasn't just a malfunction or an odd anomaly. They were somewhere they were never supposed to be. The space around them wasn't just unknown, it was actively resisting them. The realization hit him hard. He had pushed them all into this. He had convinced them to come, and now they were trapped in a place where the rules of the universe no longer applied. "Lyra," Ethan said, his voice barely a whisper, "this was a mistake. We should have never come here." For a moment, the captain said nothing. Then she turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "We can't think about that now. We have to figure out what's happening. If we stay calm and stick together, we can make it through this." But even as she said the words, Ethan could see the doubt in her eyes. Lyra had always been the rock of the crew, the one who never wavered, even in the most dangerous of situations. But now, she too was starting to understand the magnitude of their mistake. As the crew continued to monitor the ship's systems, something even more alarming occurred. The view screens that had been showing their surroundings now displayed an eerie, static-filled image. At first, it looked like a distorted field of stars, but as the image focused, it became clear that something was wrong. The stars were shifting, flickering in and out of existence, as if they were mere illusions. And then, a shape appeared. It wasn't a ship or an object they recognized. It was something massive, beyond the scale of anything they had ever seen. It loomed on the edge of the screen, just outside their immediate view, moving with unnatural speed. It was as if it existed both inside and outside of their reality at the same time. The crew watched, frozen in fear, as the shape grew larger, closer. "Ethan, what is that?" Lyra asked, her voice strained. There was no answer, no explanation that made sense. Whatever it was, it didn't belong in their universe. The shape seemed to pulse, almost as if it were alive, and a deep, low hum filled the ship. It was a sound that resonated in their bones, sending a wave of dread through each of them. It was unlike anything they had ever heard before. The hum vibrated the walls, rattling their teeth. The air around them felt heavy, charged with an energy that they couldn't comprehend. As the crew stared at the shape, a voice echoed through the ship's intercom. It wasn't a human voice, no, it was something far older, far more alien. The words were distorted, like they were coming from the other side of some invisible wall, but the message was unmistakable. "Leave, now, or be consumed." The crew stiffened at the voice's eerie command. The temperature in the ship seemed to drop, and a wave of cold rushed over them. The ship's lights flickered again, and the hum grew louder, vibrating through the floors beneath their feet. "That's not possible," Jax muttered under his breath, shaking his head in disbelief. This is beyond anything we've encountered." Captain Lyra slammed her fist against the control panel. "We've made a mistake," she said, her voice tight with fear and frustration. "We need to leave. Now." Ethan nodded, feeling a deep, sinking sense of regret. They had made it this far, but the cost of exploring the forbidden Terran space was becoming painfully clear. The ship was in danger. The crew was in danger. And it was all because of a map, a dream of discovery, and his own reckless ambition. But as the crew tried to initiate the ship's emergency warp sequence, nothing happened. The controls were unresponsive. The hum outside the ship grew louder, almost as if it were feeding off their fear. Ethan's heart raced as he realized that the alien presence they had encountered wasn't just some strange anomaly. It was a warning. A warning that they were no longer welcome in this part of the galaxy. And now, they had to pay the price for their curiosity. The Endeavor was trapped. There was no way to escape. Ethan's mind raced, trying to think of a solution. But nothing came. They were stuck. The only way out was to survive the consequences of their mistake. The crew gathered in the central hub of the ship, their faces pale and tense. The situation had turned from one of excitement to one of terror in a matter of hours. Ethan could barely look them in the eye, knowing that he had led them all into this nightmare. "We need a plan," Lyra said, her voice now calm but firm. "We'll fight our way out if we have to. But we'll do it together." But even as she spoke, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the universe had already passed judgment on them. Their mistake had sealed their fate. The question now was, would they survive long enough to make it back? The days aboard the Endeavor felt like weeks as the crew struggled to maintain control of their ship, trapped in the midst of an ancient and malevolent force. The hum outside their ship continued, vibrating through their bones, while the shape that had appeared on their view screen loomed, both distant and suffocating, as though it existed in two places at once. It was as though the universe itself was bending around them, and they were mere pawns in some cosmic game. Ethan's mind was reeling. What had they stumbled upon? This was no longer a journey of discovery, it was a battle for survival. And as the crew worked tirelessly to stabilize the ship's systems, strange, distorted images began to flicker on their monitors, images that weren't from the ship's sensors, but something else entirely. It was the first time any of them had seen these things. Figures, humanoid but distorted, seemed to flicker in and out of existence. They appeared in the static like phantoms, their faces twisted in silent agony. They were real, Ethan could feel it. They were trying to communicate, or perhaps to warn them. "What is this?" Lyra said, her voice trembling as she watched the latest image on her screen. The figure was an older man, with eyes that glowed faintly in the darkness. His mouth moved, but no sound came. Ethan leaned in closer. His heart pounded. He'd seen these figures before, not in person, but in fragments, in the lore that had been passed down through generations. They were remnants of the ancient Terran Empire, the one that had vanished long before humanity ever stepped foot on the stars. The Terran civilization was a legend, lost to time, and what was left of it were ruins, cryptic artifacts, and whispers in the void. But none of them had ever believed the stories were true. Now, standing before him, these ancient beings, whatever they were not just stories. They were real, and they had a message for them. "We need to understand this," Ethan said, his voice rising with a mix of fear and curiosity. "These figures, they must be the last remnants of the Terran civilization. We found their ghostly remnants. But why are they here? What are they trying to show us?" Lyra turned toward him. "We don't have time to study this. We need to get out of here, fast. The ship's still falling apart, and those things outside are growing closer." But Ethan couldn't pull his gaze away. There was something about the figures that seemed familiar. He watched as the glowing eyes of one of the figures locked onto him, and for a moment, it felt as though they were looking right into his soul. Then, the images began to change. The figure's lips moved again, but this time, their message came through. "We were the first, and the last. The Terran Empire fell because we reached too far. You are repeating our mistakes." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "The Terran Empire," he whispered. This wasn't just a warning. It was a message, from a civilization long destroyed by its own ambition. The figure continued. "You should not have come. You will not leave. The space you enter is cursed. The galaxy is unforgiving. We tried to conquer it. Now we are its prisoners." The ship groaned as if in response. The walls seemed to pulse, reverberating with an unseen force. The crew scrambled to hold on to their positions as the Endeavor shuddered violently. "Shut it off!" Lyra shouted, as alarms blared across the ship. "We're losing power." Jack slammed his fist against the console. "It's not just the ship. It's the space itself, it's pulling us in." The figures on the screen continued their eerie display, their voices now a cacophony of static and fractured phrases. "Leave this place, or join us in our prison." Ethan's mind raced. This was more than just a warning, it was a prophecy, a curse passed down through the ages. The Terrans had once reached for the stars, only to be consumed by the very space they sought to control. And now, their fate was entwined with this cursed void. "They're not just ghosts," Ethan muttered, his heart pounding. "They're prisoners, trapped in a place outside of time. They're trying to warn us. We need to leave before it's too late." Lyra clenched her fists. "And how do you propose we do that? The ship's systems are failing. We can't just turn around and hope for the best. We need a plan, and we need it fast." The ship trembled again, this time with greater force, as though it were being pulled by an unseen hand. Ethan watched the figures on the screen one last time. Their eyes seemed to plead with him, their faces twisted in eternal torment. "You cannot escape," one of them whispered, its voice now more desperate. "This space is a tomb for all who enter. You have come too far. It is already too late." Suddenly, the screen went dark. The crew stood in stunned silence, the weight of what they had just learned sinking in. They weren't just dealing with a mysterious force. They were facing the consequences of humanity's own ambition, the same ambition that had brought the Terran Empire to ruin. And now, it seemed, it was their turn. "Ethan," Lyra said, her voice soft but laced with fear, "what have we done?" Ethan could only stare ahead, his mind in turmoil. He had led them here, and now, they were caught in the grip of something far older, far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The curse of the Terran Empire was real. And they had just become its latest victims. But as the ship continued to shake and the eerie voice of the ancient figures echoed in their minds, Ethan realized there was no turning back. The only question now was how much longer they could survive in a space that was slowly, relentlessly consuming them. The truth was clear, they had entered a tomb, and there was no escape. The Endeavour trembled violently, and the air inside the ship felt thick and suffocating. The crew scrambled to stabilize the ship's systems, but it was no use, the forces acting against them were too powerful. The eerie hum from outside had grown louder, and the images of the Terran Empire's lost souls still haunted their screens. They had pushed too far into the unknown, and now they were paying the price for their reckless curiosity. Captain Lyra gripped the control panel tightly, her knuckles white. "We need to get out of here, now. We've lost all communication with the fleet, and the ship's power levels are critical." Her voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable edge of panic beneath her calm exterior. They were running out of time. Ethan stood beside her, staring at the view screen. The shape from earlier, the one that had been hovering on the edge of their vision, was now unmistakably close. It loomed just outside the ship, growing larger with every passing moment. It was no longer just a shape, it was a massive, twisting, dark mass that seemed to distort reality itself, shifting and pulsating like a living entity. "We need to make a decision," Ethan said, his voice tight. "This is it. We can't outrun it. We can't fight it. But maybe we can escape." Lyra turned to him, her eyes filled with frustration. "Escape? How, Ethan? The ship's systems are failing. The gravity wells are locking us in place. We're trapped in this place." The crew was silent as they tried to process their dwindling options. Jax, the engineer, was frantically tapping on his console, sweat beading on his forehead. "There's no way to power up the engines enough to break free. The gravitational anomaly is too strong. Even if we could engage the warp drive, we wouldn't make it out in time." The ship groaned again, a low, deep sound, as though the very structure of the Endeavour was being pulled apart. Outside, the dark shape moved closer, a swirling vortex of shadow and light, like a mouth opening to devour them. The crew had no choice but to accept that their previous assumptions had been wrong. This wasn't just a random region of space, it was something far worse. It was a trap. Ethan's mind raced, his thoughts frantically searching for a solution. They had come this far. They couldn't give up now. But how? They had crossed a threshold where no technology, no skill, and no willpower could help them. They were in a space where the laws of the universe didn't apply. They had entered a prison, and there were no keys to unlock the door. Then, it hit him. "There's one last option," Ethan said, his voice quiet but filled with determination. Lyra turned toward him, her eyes sharp. "What are you talking about?" "The map," Ethan replied. "When I first found it, I didn't understand what it meant. But now I think I do. The map doesn't just lead us here, it's a guide. It's the way out." The crew stared at him, confused. "What do you mean?" Jax asked, shaking his head. Ethan stepped forward, pointing to the glowing map on the screen. "It's not just showing us the forbidden Terran space. It's showing us a path, a safe route out of here. But we have to follow it exactly, no shortcuts, no deviations. We need to take the risk and follow the map's guidance. It's the only chance we have." Captain Lyra hesitated. "But how can we trust it? Everything we've done so far has led us deeper into this hellhole." "I know," Ethan said. "But I'm out of ideas. And if we don't do something, we're going to be stuck here forever. This map, it's the only lead we have left." The crew exchanged glances, fear and doubt written on their faces. But they all knew one thing: if they stayed in the path they were on, they would never make it out alive. Their only hope now was to trust Ethan's instincts, to follow the path laid out by a lost civilization that had once been destroyed by its own ambition. With no other options left, Captain Lyra nodded. "Fine. We do it your way. But if this fails, we're not making it out of here." Ethan felt a chill wash over him, but there was no turning back now. He quickly relayed the course adjustments to the helm, and the crew moved to their positions, their hearts pounding in their chests. The Endeavour lurched forward as they followed the coordinates the map provided, moving deeper into the heart of the forbidden Terran space. The darkness outside seemed to close in on them, the swirling mass of shadows and energy growing ever larger. The ship's hull groaned under the strain as they pushed forward, relying on the map's guidance to navigate through the chaos. For what felt like an eternity, they moved through the void, the ship rattling and shaking, the hum of the anomaly outside growing louder and louder. The crew fought to hold on to hope, but the overwhelming fear of what awaited them gnawed at their insides. And then, just when it seemed like the ship couldn't take any more, they passed through a shimmering, invisible barrier. The ship suddenly jolted as if it had broken free from a deep, gravitational grip. The strange, oppressive feeling that had filled the ship lifted, and the vibration ceased. The hum from outside faded into nothingness. The Endeavour was no longer trapped. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. They had done it. They had escaped. But as the crew gathered around the command center, trying to process what had just happened, something shifted in Ethan's chest. It wasn't just relief, it was something darker, a feeling he couldn't shake. Had they truly escaped? Or had they merely been let go? As the stars began to return to their normal, familiar shapes on the view screen, the crew remained silent. The path ahead was clear. But the knowledge that they had narrowly escaped something far beyond their understanding was heavy in their minds. They had entered the forbidden Terran space in search of answers. And they had found them, answers that came with a price. The universe had shown them its darkness. And though they had escaped, they knew one thing for certain: some doors, once opened, should never be closed. And some spaces, once entered, should never be left behind. As the ship sailed into the unknown, Ethan couldn't help but wonder, would the universe ever truly let them go? Or would it be waiting for their return?